Um, I heard from Chris B that that 50,000 got saved or 40,000 got saved in a year or something like that. Um, I took all the documents from the Manhattan Training Center. I took rosters, roles, financial reports, and I put together a members directory. And at last count, name wise, I came up with close to 1,400 names. This would be steady live in members. This is not how many we said the sinner's prayer with or who lived out. These are names that appear on documents, left and right at the MTC, documents that have to do with finances, different listings, lamb ledgers that had names. So 1,400, somewhere in there, was the actual membership, live-in membership. As far as how big the church really was, um, I heard at one point there was 127 fellowship houses. But again, I got a fellowship house sheet that was printed back then, and it was more like 50 houses, 50 or 60 houses, if I'm mistaken, with the full amount, and the church peaked around 77, 78. Now, uh, again, staying with the history as much as I can. Um, so there was witnessing and Bible studies. There was a big meeting. First big meeting had 200, 250. The largest big meeting was close to 3,000. And some ex-members know that Stewart said that when we got to 3,000, he'd tell his testimony. I have a theory about that. I think Stewart doesn't have a testimony. I think that um, we never reached 3,000. He never really had to say where he came from. Now, did he orchestrate it? I'm not sure. Um, but I think that it's, to say the least, a game to hide your testimony when, if you want to be a pastor of a church, a Christian church, they need to know where you came from. First Timothy and Titus talk about standards: temperate, sensible, husband of one wife, manage your household well, not a drunkard, no slanderer, well thought of by outsiders. There's a list of standards. And we know Paul's testimony, and we know some of the other brothers in the Bible, their testimony. Where you came from, how you got saved, and having others review you or test you is essential for the job of pastor. For some reason, that was a mystery when it came to Stewart. So from 71 up to 76, getting into 7, it was fellowship houses as far as Cleveland, as high as Montreal, and down into Virginia, and I believe the Carolinas, maybe North Carolina, fellowship houses with fellowship leaders. Stewart did divorce his wife and married Gail in December of 76. And the first Lamb Ledger has a picture of Stewart and Gail on it. Now, what's odd is after they get married, there is the Manhattan Training Center. Manhattan Training Center, or the MTC, or the New York Training Center, was a reorganization, shall we say. There's a couple of reasons for it. There was Herman told me that it was a kind of preparation for the end times, that we need to be battle tried and tough and true because the end times were upon us. We needed to be able to survive in any condition. Strangely enough, Stewart never really experienced the same conditions that our brethren experienced in the lofts. And you can read that in the history. You can see articles on the website about that. The Manhattan Training Center was also a kind of punishment. If you weren't doing well in the houses, then you would be sent to the school or sent to New York or sent to Manhattan. and getting your head right, getting your training. The Manhattan Training Center was somewhat a precursor, somewhat, to other schools of training, like the Young Sheep House was another form of school, although different. The remedial middle program in Philadelphia was supposed to be a school type of school. Stewart envisioned several schools that you go from lamb to sheep, young sheep, to middle, to older, eventually, child of God, then young man, and then man of God, something like that. Um, but the Manhattan Training Center, I have recordings on the website. Um, it was probably the worst part. If you were really involved in the Manhattan Training Center, that's probably, in my opinion, some of the worst of the FF Kobu experience. How the dealing sessions went, how the judging went, the living conditions, terrible. Now, to say that to compare damage, I think it's not helpful. I just think that to show that there are differences in the experience and different types of damage is important. But I would also say that the 90s and some of the teaching that Stewart was doing, the escape recipe, um, volunteering for the lake of fire, just some of the verbal and psychological abuse that he put on the brethren later was even more severe. I would say that the message was absolute poison later, but I would say the treatment at the Manhattan Training Center was pretty brutal. My brother Chris lived in there, and he went to diplomat meetings. And again, there are plenty that went through the school that can tell you how bad it was. Let me just cut this tape, and then we'll conclude the part.